JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Golden Heart, Golden Ring, is neither owned by nor affiliated with Hirohiko Araki, Shueisha, Lucky Land Communications, David Production, and other companies involved with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in any way. This is a fan-made project. The material used for this project is offered publicly and without profit, in accordance with Title 17, USC Section 107. The following work is intended to be shared and listened to for free by fans.
I know you've suffered a lot for the things that have happened, but it's not possible to save everyone. The choices you make are too many and the world is too complex. Neither you nor I can know which choice is right and which is wrong,
the boy said, all in one breath. He was a strange boy, and on his clothes he had pinned big brooches in the shape of ladybugs. His gaze was clear, and that meant he was speaking from the heart. It was as if he emanated some sort of golden light. The proud blood that flowed for generations in the vein of the Joestar family's descendants flowed without a doubt in his as well, and that beautiful light left a mark on the girl's heart.
We did choose the path of fight, and I'm not ashamed of it. I hope it's the same for you. I truly hope so.
With those words, the boy left the church behind and began to walk towards the final battle. The girl, looking at his retreating figure, had perceived the heroic strength of his resolve and was filled with more respect for him than she'd ever felt for anyone before. The path of his struggle, perhaps, was lit by that golden light. A thought crossed her mind.
As he's going to fight his battle, then I...
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Golden Heart, Golden Ring, by Hirohiko Araki, Shotaro Miya, and Giichi Otsuka. Capitolo Uno. The emptiest place in the whole world is a hotel room after the checkout. The unmade bed, both the bathrobe and the towels thrown in a corner, the closed windows, the notepad scribbled here and there, the bureau tumbled on the floor. The scent of soap foam swirled down the drain. Just shortly ago there was someone. Now, they're gone, and nothing left in the room but a faint trace. The girl was in a room like this, empty. She opened the window, and the bright afternoon light poured into every crevice. The sky was azure and limpid. The sea that could be seen below ranged from green to cyan, peppered with dots of white, until a blue so deep it seemed to drag you in a melange of colors that made it glisten as a precious stone. Those over there, white, are the small islands of the Adriatico. Now that from the wide open window enters the rumble of people moving about in front of the hotel, the room can finally begin to breathe again. The old closet and the dresser, pale as corpses, revive illuminated by the sea's reflections. The girl tied her hair with a foulard, put on a pair of large gloves and an apron over the pale green cleaner's uniform, and finally got to work. Moving away from the window and towards the bed, she removed the light orange blanket and folded it with swift movements, then laid it on the nearest surface. She took off the creased sheets and tossed them in the linen bag that was equipped on the metal cleaning cart. In the sack, there was already a heap of more than a dozen bed sheets, and looking carefully, one could notice how some were stained with tomato juice, spilt liquor from a guest, or even blood. If she drew her face closer, she could smell the odor of sweat, blood, and saliva, an odor of near animalistic grease that filled her with nausea. It is said that man is a thinking reed, but to her, nothing could be further from the truth. For her, rather than a plant, it was definitely more realistic to compare man to an animal. Not that she cared much in the first place. She pondered that what happened yesterday in that room was not her business, and she didn't want to know after all. Maybe a fat guy, one that sticks the last few hairs on his head with gel. In short, a typical middle-aged man, had brought there his young mistress for some filthy acts. Or maybe a young Japanese tourist, perhaps a student, spent a romantic holiday downing cheap wine over a mountain of seafood. It wasn't her business, she thought again, returning to work. She grabbed freshly laundered sheets from the cart's other bag and spread them out on the bed. She folded the sheet under the mattress first on the left side, and then at the foot of the bed and near the pillow, then on the right side, in good order. The bed being done, She quickly swept the dust from the chest of the drawers in the table, then moved on to the bathroom. A brief cleaning with the vacuum, and with a single gesture, she threw away in the garbage bag hairs, empty candy wrappers, magazines, newspapers, tourist maps that were no longer useful, and all the other scraps. There. Done. And then again. And again.
My job is to clean this room, as I did yesterday, the day before, and last week.
Thought the girl.
Just that. Nothing more, nothing less.
These are the circumstances that made it so Coniglio, 18 by December, became a chambermaid at the hotel. Just 2 months ago, her grandmother, who lived here in Venezia, was the victim of a car accident. She was a woman in her 60s. The vague memory Coniglio had of her was of a tanned woman, of olive complexion, that stuck her head out of her house's window. She was a sturdy old lady, the picture of health. Her fleshy mouth and her voluptuous figure, almost alluring despite her age, conveyed full womanliness. Like this, if Carmen had grown older, she probably would have resembled her. That was the impression she gave. After her husband's death, in other words, Coniglio's grandfather, which happened a few years earlier, she began her new life as a single woman in Venezia, working as a chambermaid at the luxurious Hotel Mondoaria, the city's most famous, so close to San Marco and the Riva degli Schiavoni, right by the sea. This, at least, was what she had heard from her mother, or from some relatives that maybe she wouldn't have even met had her grandmother's accident never have happened. Coniglio met her only a handful of times when she was very little, and honestly didn't know her much. It all started when, suddenly, they stopped hearing back from Grandma. Without any notice, she stopped showing up at work. Her worried colleagues went to search for her at home, to ensure that nothing had happened to her. They found an empty house, and having no other means of contacting her, ended up calling Coniglio's mother. From Roma to Venezia, they rushed immediately, but were unable to figure out what had happened. The police, as always, weren't helpful at all. The only piece of information they got came from the unkind gossip of the Chatterer neighbors, according to which she recently got a new man and blah blah blah. Recalling Grandma's love for life, and a body practically overflowing with femininity, they couldn't help but think it was far from unlikely. She devoted some time consoling her mother, who, due to worrying, spent the whole day crying locked in the house, or receiving relatives that flocked there as soon as they got news of the disappearance. Until one day, a woman knocked at her door, saying she was Mondoaria's personnel manager, the hotel where Grandma worked. She explained that they were facing a shortage of staff, and basically asked her to work in her grandmother's place. Not knowing if or when Grandma would return, Coniglio welcomed that proposal as an unexpected alternative to the never-ending helpless languish her mother had chosen, so she accepted the employment position.
Until her return.
When she began working, she realized an unexpected thing. Making beds using the vacuum and the cloth on furniture, bringing forgotten items from guest rooms back to the reception, and many other little repetitive gestures which composed her routine. In conclusion, there wasn't anything that suited her more, she thought. She quickly learned the basic rules to work well and fast, and soon, even the bosses didn't fail to notice her. She considered that, even if she returned to Roma, what awaited there was only a part-time job at a fast food place, helping at home, and hanging out with friends. She rightfully started thinking that remaining in Venezia could have been a good choice. Like that, a month passed, and then 2. From Grandmother's house to the hotel where she worked, and right when she was getting accustomed to her new life, came the news that Grandma had been a victim of a collision. They rammed into her with the car and disappeared without helping. The hit and run happened in the area, at the Lido di Venezia, renowned for its international film festival. Grandma was in the car when the vehicle behind rear-ended her and fled. They said she hit her head with such force that she probably died on the spot, but nobody ever found out why the woman was at the Lido in the first place, nor why she checked in at the hotel where she was sojourning with Mr. and Mrs. Brown. Everyone would have guessed it was a pseudonym, but the more she asked for details, the more everything seemed shrouded in mystery. That man existed for real then. The unkind rumors of the Chatterer neighbors weren't completely baseless. The problem was that the man in question, in spite of the police's investigations, was nowhere to be found. The fact that he didn't show up regardless of his partner's accident put forth the possibility that he was a delinquent or something alike, and people suspected some complicity, as if in a trashy crime novel. The only thing certain is that nothing was ever known about him. Maybe he never existed at all. In the end, Grandma's remains were brought back home in Venezia, and a simple funeral ceremony was held. Coniglio's mother never stopped crying, and her siblings and other relatives, between one sip of wine and another, exchanged their most precious memories of the deceased. For Coniglio, out and about, the funeral was over in a flash. To her mother, who prepared to return to Roma after the sad task, the girl simply said,
"There's the work at the hotel,"
and remained in Venezia, imagining herself alone while making the bed in a stranger's hotel room, away from that Roma full of friends, sometimes gave her a sense of insecurity, a weird sensation.
Away from my native city to continue my grandma's work because of my passiveness. I really am a chronic hesitant,
she thought. She told herself that, maybe, she had to be grateful to Grandma if she managed to break away from Roma, where she had tons of good memories, but an equal number of bad ones. From the room's window that faced the Riva delle Schiavoni, she overlooked the sea. The sea and its scent, that of salt which pleasantly teases the nostril, mixed with the putrid one of mud that accumulates on the shores, which seems to fill the sky to the brim. By lending an ear, one could listen to the voices of herds of tourists, those of kids, as well as those suspicious of thieves and swindlers. While she wiped the vanity table near the window, intent on eavesdropping those faraway voices, a stabbing pain on the finger brought her back to the present. She inspected her right hand's index finger and found a small splinter of wood embedded in it. A drop of blood oozed from the wound. She hastily brought the digit to her mouth and sucked on it. The afternoon was going by. Maybe its dim light had distracted her. She tried pulling out the splinter by squeezing the finger with the other hand, but the more she fretted, the more blood came out. She felt her temples throbbing, her forehead covered in sweat. It was then that a small white rabbit appeared over her shoulder. A rabbit so small that it could fit on the palm of your hand. No. Taking a better look, perhaps it wasn't really a rabbit. It was only a round creature all covered in white fur. Compared to the body, it had disproportionately large ears that constantly moved, much like an insect's antennae,
and seemed to be exploring Coniglio,
delicately touching her from the shoulders to her face, her stomach, her lower back. What set it apart the most from a normal rabbit were the eyes. One was different from the other. The right eye was red, of a dark red, like that of a ruby. The left one was instead yellow, of a color similar to that of gold, and was slightly smaller than the right. Between the eyes, in the middle of the forehead, sat a small blue stone. Similar stones were also on the back of its paws, and on the tip of its huge ears. They all shone rhythmically with a light of their own.
"The cure!"
exclaimed the girl, while the white creature reached the finger where the splinter was, stuck with its nose, and started licking it. In no time, the wound started to close, and the cure, after spitting the splinter from its mouth,
curled up at Coniglio's feet.
The finger was perfectly healed. The place where, just until now, the splinter had been stuck was a bit warmer.
Coniglio massaged it, turning to the little animal as if to an old friend she hadn't seen for a long time.
"You've grown up,"
she whispered to it, stroking its back, and the critter, which had straightened its ears, made them waver in front of its snout, emitting a strange cry, as if in agreement.
Coniglio sat down on the floor,
moving its large ears like a cat, crouching on her knees. The cure closed its eyes.
When the stones encrusted on its long ears touched, they made a noise, a kind of tinkle which Coniglio found incredibly pleasant. Suddenly, while petting the cure's back, Coniglio felt someone was about to enter the room and jump to her feet.
"This isn't the time to slack off, Coniglio. Check-in time is about to begin."
It was Leoni, a guy who worked at the hotel's kitchens.
He had been working there for over 10 years now, and lately never missed a chance to give Coniglio attention.
To tell the truth, it's not like she was thrilled about it. She couldn't even say that he was bothering her. The reality was that all the necessary formulas to relationships with people quickly drained her. On the other hand, she understood that when working among people, it's impossible to do without them. So, the fact is, she agreed to go out with Leoni that evening. Likely, not seeing her come down, he had come up to check on her.
I know. This was the last room. I'll take the cart to the laundry and then I'll be done. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Wait for me.
Be careful, though. No matter how good you've become at work, if you get caught lazing around, you risk someone telling the bosses.
Okay, I got it.
I have to go prepare for dinner. I'll wait for you downstairs.
Coniglio hurriedly thrust the cleaning supplies into the cart and locked the door to the room. Then, panting, joined Leoni, who had left first and was waiting in front of the elevators.
It's for tonight at 8 then. You won't miss it, right?
Leoni, laughing, asked a final confirmation from Coniglio.
To him, the white figure of the cure, which scurried along the girl's feet, was not visible.
Coniglio had that peculiar thing ever since she was little.
She had the mysterious power to absorb the pain of people she touched, and this power came from the cure. She didn't remember when she first became of the creature's presence. As a child, she was always hanging around the city, and there were countless quarrels with bullies and arrogant kids in the neighborhood, all over petty things. Someone who bullied, and someone who got bullied, someone who had stolen something from another, and so on. All things, in short, which any child has experienced, but, strangely,
Coniglio always found herself in their midst.
A small matter always became a much bigger one. Punches were traded, and the one who wouldn't give in until the end was always her, and she never lost a fight. There were the bullies much bigger than her who ran to their mother, blood running from the nose, whimpering that
Coniglio was being mean.
Coniglio's mother had her hands full apologizing to the neighborhood mothers who showed up to complain.
You're really a tomboy. I would really like to know where you got that from.
Coniglio heard it all the time from her mother.
What was strange was that there hadn't been a single time that she returned home with any sort of wound, despite the ruffians punching her nose or pulling her hair, or dragging her on the ground enough to skin her knees. Once she returned home with the pink dress she had just been given all torn up. Yet not only had they never needed to rush her to the emergency room, but her scratches also healed even before returning home. What healed her was that mysterious rabbit that was always near her, the cuts on her still innocent face, the red bumps appearing amidst tousled hair like eggs in a bird's nest. When the tiny mouth of the rabbit licked them, the pain inexplicably disappeared, and any type of wound vanished as if it had never been there.
Thus, Coniglio and the cure found themselves sharing secret moments
that belonged only to the two of them. When she confessed to those red and golden eyes things that she
couldn't have been able to tell even a friend.
She felt strangely light, as if a weight had come off her shoulders. So much so that she had become convinced the creature could understand everything perfectly. Gradually, she began spending less and less time with her friends, and tending to stay holed up at home. Naturally, she still kept seeing the friends with whom she usually played house or other games, or with whom she went shopping at department stores in the neighborhood, just as she hadn't stopped getting into fights with the ruffians in the area. But her best friend, as well as her treasure, had undeniably become the mysterious white creature that she called the Cure.
The local bullies, seeing that Coniglio continued to face them with a look of smugness despite all the beatings she took, had started calling her Coni l'Immortale.
Everyone has already left,
Winona told her, already ready to leave, when Coniglio entered the hotel staff's locker room.
Winona was a second-year student at the University of Venezia. She was an American that came for one of those cultural exchange programs for students.
She too, like Coniglio, worked as an apprentice chambermaid.
Hers was a kind of part-time job, but given that her father had the reputation for being close friends of the owner and managers of the hotel, she'd become some sort of manager responsible for the cleaning of several floors.
She was 4 years older than Coniglio, but with her she quickly became very friendly.
To her, who was so reserved, she'd taught plenty of things about work at the hotel. To be precise, she'd taught her that the most important thing in that job was a good relationship with your colleagues. In reality, she'd made her a detailed list of the various members, from the dullest to the most spiteful, for example, explaining the many friendly relations that linked one another, and things like that. She was practically a more experienced companion that would teach her in detail even those things which, if considered of no importance, as a result, became indeed inconsequential. Winona studied literature at university. When they ate together, she happened to talk about authors and works of Italian and French literature with great ease.
For someone like Coniglio, who only read comics or magazines about music and cinema, the names Winona mentioned in her speeches were almost all unknown, or at best, heard mentioned by chance.
But if she pointed this out to her, She then go on to talk about colleagues, so much so that she gave the impression of being a huge gossiper, whose only asset was being an intelligent woman. To tell the truth, it wasn't like Winona enjoyed great popularity among her colleagues, to the point that, seeing the thick glasses she always wore, people called her the American prude, or four eyes behind her back. Perhaps they were jealous that she had gotten her job because of her father's connections.
But on that day too, exchanging a few words with Winona was one of the things that Coniglio was looking forward to the most.
Winona's speech, when she spoke in Italian with that strong English inflection of hers, didn't change at all whether she gossiped or she talked about complicated literature, and it was fascinating. From what she said, it was easily understood that she was a clever person, and for this she envied her a bit.
In a few words, Coniglio really liked Winona.
And for someone like her, who didn't easily open up to new friendships, that meant a lot.
Now, Coney...
Winona started saying, removing her glasses by hooking a finger on the thick black frame. Her face, without the glasses, was as gorgeous as a Hollywood actress.
The first time she'd noticed it, Coniglio had been quite surprised.
What did you decide to do?
About what?
Replied Coniglio, removing the cleaning uniform.
Come on, don't play dumb.
I'm not.
I'm talking about Leoni. You got a date tonight, just the two of you know?
Nothing of the sort, really.
There's nothing to hide, but perhaps it'll be better if you don't trust that guy too much. The other day, I saw him at Piazzale Roma with another woman. Claudia said so too. Italian men are all alike.
Indeed. A good-looking guy like Leoni. It would be surprising if he didn't already have a girl. I wondered if he really likes me. Yes, maybe it's true, but...
Despite thinking like that, Coniglio couldn't convince herself.
Hey, don't make such a somber face.
Winona told her, worried about what she saw on her countenance.
If it worries you, you simply shouldn't have told me anything.
Coniglio couldn't help but think, but she said nothing.
I'm sorry, I didn't think you were this interested in Leoni.
Leave it be. It has nothing to do with Leoni.
Really, I'm sorry.
There's nothing to be sorry about.
But...
All's fine, really. Everything's okay.
After staring at Coniglio's face for a long while, Winona finally replied.
Then, to make up for ruining your dates,
She started, lowering her gaze.
I'll pay this evening. I'm offering you dinner.
What?
Enough shattering. I pay and that's it.
Coniglio, seeing Winona finishing that sentence looking ashamed, felt a bit relieved.
The building that housed the Mondo Area Hotel was built in the 16th century, and it originally was the summer house of a prestigious Venetian family. The current owners had acquired it and turned it into a hotel 100 years ago. The rooms had been remodeled several times to be modernized, either to equip them with a shower or the minibar and such things. Regardless, the atmosphere in the rooms was very relaxing, and the furniture and beds were old but comfortable. In addition, the rooms that overlooked Riva dell'East Schiavone were gifted with a luxurious terrace, while the back faced a canal where there was a small dockage from where one could get on a gondola. On the ground floor you could find the restaurant where Leoni worked. The kitchen was of an average level, the kind that pleases tourists, but to enjoy a good Venetian wine there while being caressed by the particular luminosity of the sun being reflected in the lagoon had its charm. It was truly the relaxed atmosphere that made the spot a place of success, listed among the most recommended in numerous travel guides. Entering the hotel from the main entrance which faces the lagoon, the first thing you noticed was the entrance hall's own surroundings, obtained by internally raising the ceiling up to the third floor. The walls were decorated with frescoes and paintings that belonged to a family collection enriched for generations, and which produced the atmosphere of the old and beautiful Europe. The shadows were cut by the sun rays that reached from the outside and seemed to cling to the skin, and lit it in a golden light. At the center, as if sprouted from the floor, towered the marble columns that gave a pleasant accent to the setting. You would only need to take 2 or 3 steps towards those columns for staff members to welcome you, as if they'd been there waiting for you. With the luggage delivered to the hotel porters, all you needed was to walk straight across the lobby to find yourself before the reception. If you turned right, there was the restaurant, while if you turned left, you find a small coffee shop, perfect for when you need to wait for someone.
It was right there that Coniglio was waiting for Winona's return,
who had gone to the nearby post office to send a letter. Leoni's face, when told she wouldn't go to the date that evening, was a spectacle to behold. A mix of surprise for something he certainly didn't expect, confusion because he couldn't see the reason behind it, as well as supplication and repressed anger.
Upon seeing such an expression, Coniglio had for a moment had the feeling she'd done something unfair and regretted it.
As much as she had been encouraged by Winona, she felt surprised to have done such a crazy thing. Mostly it was how quickly she had taken action, something normally unthinkable for her character, which amazed her even more as she was saying,
Sorry, Leoni. Something came up this evening and I can't put it off.
Don't worry. We'll do it next time. There will be a next time, right?
Leoni replied, unconvinced despite those words, while she sent him back to the kitchens and headed to the rendezvous coffee shop.
Today, I feel different from other days. What could be happening to me? Is it because of the cure's presence?
Thought Coniglio.
The only beverage she saw worthy of being drunk at the coffee shop was the cappuccino. Everything else, be it juices or alcohol, disgusted her. Bringing her cup to the lips, she absent-mindedly observed the flow of clients that constantly arrived. She thought that, probably, they would soon be inserting in the door the metallic key that they had received at the reception, and, with the window opened, they would involuntarily hold their breath before the sea view that would be spread in front of their eyes. Then, after the sunset, out in the city, among the students who party today like yesterday, and like they will tomorrow, to enjoy Venezia at night, and then return exhausted to rest their tired limbs on the bed she had prepared.
On that thought, Coniglio let out a sigh.
Maybe the reason why she kept doing that job was that she envied a bit that noise that tourists made for nothing. It was at that moment that she took notice of the strange atmosphere which had suddenly taken over the lobby. She couldn't immediately understand why. There was the usual busy coming and going of the hotel porters, the usual clientele arriving loaded with heavy suitcases, the usual bad smell exuded by their sweaty bodies. Then she singled out the figure of a young man who stood out heavily in such a scene. He was a whole head taller than her, roughly 1.75 meters. He was blonde, and his hair done in a strange style, as if the wind ruffled it in locks, and said locks had been gathered together by force with a comb. Draped over the skin, he wore an outfit with moss green jacket and trousers, cut out as if the holes were a polka dot pattern, and wore on the neck a blue necktie with large strawberries drawn on it. He had the relaxed posture of someone who was there waiting for someone, but on that elegant face his eyes shone with a strange light. As if he had felt the girl's gaze on him, he suddenly turned to her, and with a gentle smile, approached.
Ciao,
he greeted cheerfully.
Coniglio felt confused.
The young man now wore a merry expression, completely different from the alert and cautious one just before. She wondered whoever he could be.
I'm here waiting for a friend, but...
The young man started, and a fresh scent of mint wafted from his mouth.
I forgot my watch at home and don't know what time it is.
Exclaimed Coniglio, and looked at her watch.
It's almost 2.
Grazie.
He thanked her politely with a slight nod and returned to where he had been waiting before. The smell of mint left with him.
Watching him walk away, involuntarily, Coniglio felt a cold shiver running down her spine.
What was happening? At first she couldn't understand what she saw in front of her. From the young man's back she saw propagating a thick cloud of purple smoke which soon began to take shape. That strange thing had its body covered in a black and violet checkered motif, and its face covered with a mask similar to a medieval armor's helmet. On its fists were odd mustard-colored capsules. It gave the impression that the young man had with him some sort of spectral servant.
Upon seeing this, Coniglio felt her head spinning and placed her hands on the table for support.
She had the sensation of imminent danger, as if something terrible was about to happen. As if he was fully aware she was still watching him, unable to move. The young man gave her a look and, slowly, made a wide gesture with the right hand.
And what are you daydreaming about?
Feeling touched on the shoulder without warning, Coniglio let out a cry and was so surprised she almost fell off her chair. She turned and saw Winona laughing. She'd finally returned from the post office.
Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you.
Look, there.
Coniglio pointed towards the young man.
Who is it? Have you already found a substitute for Leoni?
Coniglio would never forget Winona's face, who at that moment laughed, winking.
A dull noise rang out from below, and almost in the same instant all the lights in the hotel went out. In the distance, she heard the sound of broken glass, angry shouts, sounds similar to those made by tearing silk. The calm atmosphere that reigned over Mondo Aria's hotel lobby became shrouded in darkness in just an instant.
Coney!
She heard Winona's voice nearby.
Winona!
Coney!
She reached out her hand to where she heard the voice come from, and immediately found Winona's arm.
Are you all right? What's happening to you? What's wrong, Winona?
She got up from the chair and groped around for Winona, who she'd seen behind her.
It burns! I can feel myself burning!
Coniglio's hand reached something warm and slimy.
What's going on? What is it?
And in that moment, the lights returned. Coniglio had a hard time believing what she had in front of her eyes. The swollen arm, the black streaks running down the body. The lips were twisted in a grimace, the face covered in large blisters. The horror was such that she was about to move her hand away. The abomination in front of her was Winona.
I'm burning! I'm burning! Help!
Waving her hands, she hit the blisters on her face, squishing them, causing a green substance to come out. Paying no mind to it, Winona kept compulsively scratching her whole body. Every time the nails touched the skin, it would tear away like paper, and the meat crumbled in shreds, emanating a stench like rotten fish.
What is this? What's happening to you?
Blood poured dark and thick from every part of the body, but the strangest of it all was that upon contact with the air, it turned into a purple smoke which quickly thinned out and then dissolved. Every centimeter of Winona's body was covered in blisters, pustules, and bleeding wounds.
Before Coniglio's bewildered eyes,
her legs had begun to quickly rot until they broke away from the trunk, losing its support, slowly crumpled to the ground as if moving in slow motion. She fell in a straight line, like she was about to kiss the ground in blessing. Winona's hand that desperately tried to reach for the closest chair for support broke away at the wrist with a dry noise. The other hand kept shaking in the air, searching for a hold that wasn't there. Maybe it had hit against a table, but a finger broke off, and springing off,
stuck to Coniglio's face.
With a yell, she hurried to remove it. On the hand that had touched it, it remained a dark gelatinous substance which gave off a disgusting smell, whose effect went straight to the stomach, like that of organic waste gone bad. Perhaps from the blow received when hitting the ground, Winona's neck was bent in a particularly unnatural position. A cheek was stuck to the floor, but the head kept shakingly stirring upwards as if it was coming out of that same floor.
Coney.
Maybe because her neck was broken. Now Winona was no longer even able to call the name of her friend who was right in front of her, staring at her, unable to do anything, sitting on the ground. Next to her knees, who knows when, the cure had appeared again. Winona's face started getting visibly covered in wrinkles until a violet smoke started coming out of every orifice, mouth, ears, nose, and eyes.
Coniglio kept staring horrified at the friend who was losing shreds of meat to remain in only skin and bone.
Right then, her hand touched the cure's back.
It's true. Maybe trying to use the cure's power. Maybe I can save Winona. However...
It was during that moment of hesitation on her part. The arm that Winona kept desperately twitching stopped abruptly, and, before she could realize it, fell to the ground. A dull, heavy sound.
Winona desperately tried to gather her remaining strength to scream, but her body started to completely crumble apart. The purple smoke started coming out from everywhere, as if under pressure, like in a movie being seen at a faster speed.
Coniglio was aware of someone screaming.
It was a painful cry of rage, from someone cursing everything and everyone, and it was she herself who had let it out. Blaming her would be too easy. However, in that moment, she knew too little about many things. She didn't know that the blonde boy was called Pannacotta Fugo, or that the strange purple figure she saw appear at his back was Purple Haze. She didn't know that it was a stand, the corporeal manifestation of a particularly strong vital energy which only a select few possess. The vital energy that takes shape. The stand, a presence that possesses powers in defined form, and is able to interact with the real world.
Coniglio wasn't yet aware that such a thing existed.
And she had no idea that the cure was a stand as well, and that there was a rule by which stand users attract each other. She knew absolutely nothing about any of this, yet in the wheel of fate, the gears had already begun to turn.